All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Obviously, the Cowboys trying to move forward, trying to figure out ways they can solve some problems, certainly on this defense. And we got some interesting news on that front and some interesting insights that have come out over the past 24 hours or so. But before we get into that, let's start things off, as we always like to on this channel, with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. Let's pull up this graphic right here, and I think it's very interesting. So it's a bit of an eye chart, I will admit, and this is most of the teams in the NFL. I had to condense it a little bit. You can see the Cowboys there at the bottom, but this is the percentage of how often teams play certain coverages, specifically man coverage and zone coverage. Those three columns on the left, and you look at Dallas, a 3%, 6%, 0% column, again, all the way there at the very bottom for a total of 9%. That's how often they play man coverage. Those four columns on the right, the 29, the 35, 13, and 9% from the Cowboys' perspective is how often they play zone. So you can look at that and some quick math and say Dallas plays zone 91% of the time. The only team that's even remotely close to that number is the Las Vegas Raiders, who play zone 90% of the time. So I think one of the issues here is the sort of lack of adaptability and lack of unpredictability from Dallas's defense, right? Because this was basically the same number after week 2, right? There hasn't been a lot of change. There's been some flashes of integrating some man, but against Carolina and really over the course of the season so far, they said, listen, we're going to be who we're going to be. This is Eberflus's sort of mindset. We're going to play a lot of zone, and you can see 29% cover 2, 35% cover 3, 13% cover 4, 9% cover 6. Cover 6 is just a mix of cover 4 and cover 2. Cover 2 on one side, cover 4 on the other. So you can see, I mean, they're dipping their toes in the water with all kinds of zone coverages, right? They're not being like a crazy high cover 2 team, just saying we're going to be the best cover 2 team in football. They're not saying we're going to be the best cover 3 team in football. And I think this is my biggest problem, is that the Cowboys right now, it goes back to the identity question. It'd be one thing if they're sticking with one type of zone coverage and saying, listen, by hell or high water, we're going to be the best cover 4. Sometimes you'll hear it called as quarters, the best quarters team in the National Football League. We're going to play straight up quarters half the time, more than anybody else. And gosh darn it, the old Bill Parcells, the Vince Lombardi, we're just going to be the best at it, right? We got some talent issues, but we're going to play this one defense. We're just going to be the best at executing that. But that's not even the case, right? They play a lot of different zone coverages, right? They play a lot of cover 2. They play a lot of cover 3, right? They play a healthy amount of cover 4. They're not the best at any of those. I think that's my biggest problem personally. I have no issue necessarily with being a heavy zone team. I think you got to mix up a little bit. 90-10, in this case 91-9, feels extremely high. I'd like it to be somewhere around, go 80-20, 75-25. I think that may make more sense. Maybe even 70-30 if you want to get that far. But the reality is, if you're going to be a super heavy zone team, be really good at one type of zone coverage, right? Focus your efforts on getting good at one instead of trying to split the baby a bunch of different ways. I think that's the problem the Cowboys have. Now, to be fair, some of these percentages can get kind of skewed depending on the game situation, right? So obviously, you're not going to play, certain coverages depending on the down and distance. So against the New York Jets, for example, they ended up playing a lot of shell coverages late in the game, the entire second half, basically, because they're up by a lot. So that skews the numbers a little bit. But then against the Carolina Panthers in a close game, they played a lot of cover 2 and cover 3 basically the entire game, right? And it's very little blitzing. It was their lowest blitz rate going back to week 1. So I look at this Dallas defensively in terms of their strategy and their amount of zone coverage and their predictability there is a problem. But I think my personal opinion, just looking at these numbers, is not that they're playing too much zone necessarily, even though I think they are. It's the fact that they're not getting good at one particular zone coverage. They're not saying, we're the best cover 2 team in football, we're going to go whole hog crazy at it, right? Or the best cover 3 team in football, we're going to go whole hog crazy at it. They're kind of just saying, hey, we're going to play a lot of zone, and we're not going to be good at any of it. And I think that's probably the biggest strategic error when you look at what the Cowboys are doing from an Eberflus perspective. All right, let's get into the news. So this report came out yesterday with a lot of consternation among the Cowboys faithful. This is courtesy of John Machota. He posted, not much is going well on defense, but the Cowboys owner Jerry Jones seems to think their pass rush will be the area that helps them improve. He said, quote, we've got a real strength there. And a lot of people, responded to this, and a lot of talking heads, and a lot of content creators and fans across the board said, what the heck are you talking about, right? We've seen this pass rush. It's not very good at all. It's a quite actual terrible group if you look at in terms of the talent level across the board. But I think there's something deeper here, right? Because we've heard Jerry Jones mention some players in the past about, help coming on the way with the defense, talking about Overshown, talking about Revel, young guys he likes, right? Players he likes. And I think that's where things get a little interesting, because when he says the pass rush could be a real strength. And I don't think this is a pro Sam Williams message from Jerry Jones or a pro Dante Fowler message from Jerry Jones. I think this is a, hey, we really like one guy, Donovan Ezeraku, and you can see it with what the Cowboys are doing. I'm going to pull up a post I made on X from the SMI Cowboy Show account. That's the account I run. So if you're interested in another channel to follow or another account to follow on X, give that a follow. There's a link in the description box below. But anyway, I posted Donovan Ezeraku has led the defensive end edge group in snaps for the last 3 games. The rookie is getting better and earning more playing time, as it should be. While it's hard to find a bright spot on this defense, I think it's clear that Dallas is a quality piece in this second rounder. And I think that's what Jerry Jones, or at least partly Jerry Jones, is referring to here, is that Ezeraku, if you look at the tape, but look at his performance really over the last 3 weeks, he's just becoming better and better and better. He led the team in quarterback hits. It exactly wasn't a huge amount, but he did a pretty good job with quarterback hits against the Carolina Panthers. He made a lot of plays against the Jets, made a lot of plays against the Packers, right? You look at the punch out, the forced fumble that he caused against Carolina. I mean, he doesn't have any sacks yet, but he reminds me of DeMarcus Lawrence in terms of impact, right? Run game, hustle, forcing fumbles, getting hits on the quarterback, be around the football, physical presence. Remember, this is a rookie, and he is leading this group in snap counts and has done so the last 3 games. I think this is really important. And I think what Jerry Jones is referring to is that in terms of, hey, I like our guys there, is because he likes the emergence of Donovan Ezeraku. We're seeing a budding star emerging at defensive end. And I don't mean like, a Micah Parsons rookie year where he just took the league by storm, potential defensive player of the year kind of guy and at that level, but more in the vein of a DeMarcus Lawrence, more in the vein of a Greg Ellis, right? A guy who plays fundamentally sound run game, pass game, does a lot of different things, great athlete, Ezeraku, physical force. And while he's still got a long way to go and he's far from perfect, he at every metric, you look at this Cowboys defensive end group, the edge group, Ezeraku is playing the best. And I think Jerry Jones is referring to that, right? And so he looks at this edge group and says, okay, we've got a stud in Ezeraku. We think, and this is from Jerry Jones's perspective, if we can get, say, a James Houston third down pass rush paired with Jadeveon Clowney as a first and second down guy with a little bit of Nealon mixed in, that's kind of an aggregate there, right? Houston in third and long, Clowney and Nealon in first and second down. That's kind of a solid defensive end right there. So the way he actually looks at this, is my opinion, is they actually have Ezeraku a stud, and by a combination of Houston, Clowney, and Nealon, have a really good other defensive end. And so he probably looks at it and says, okay, Sam Williams and Dante Fowler, I mean, if they can just play even close to their potential as essentially backups in that situation, in that mindset, that's fine. That's a capable group with some good depth. Now, the reality is Sam Williams and Dante Fowler, with the exception of the Jets game, have played absolutely horrible. But I think that's the mindset the Cowboys are taking, right? And I understand everyone's consternation. Like, what the heck is Jerry Jones saying? I think this is a pro Ezeraku message, because Jones is getting his data, his commentary, partly from himself, of course, but from the coaches. And everyone in the Cowboys organization has been saying Ezeraku is playing better and better football. And guys, there isn't a rookie defensive end or edge defender in the National Football League right now that's leading that group, the defensive and edge group, in snaps. There isn't. It's only Donovan Ezeraku. Part of it, of course, is an indictment of the Cowboys players like Sam Fowler and of Sam Williams at that position, and that's certainly very fair and very valid. But part of it is how critical Ezeraku is becoming to this defense and how bright his future is. And as bad as it has been defensively for Dallas, the emergence of this young player from Boston College, and again, it's not going to be perfect. He's still a rookie. There's some bumps along the way, but he's playing at a very high level. He's basically becoming the de facto best player in this defensive end edge group, and he's in going into game 7? And he's only going to get better. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some bumps along the way. But boy, in just a short order, he's gone from yikes in week 1 to probably the best player in this group and only becoming more and more productive. I'm expecting, eventually the sacks to happen, of course. But it's very clear when you listen to the reporting, you kind of, dive deeper and just don't take things at face value. You realize the Cowboys, what they're excited about when it comes to this edge group, it's this rookie second rounder, Donovan Ezeraku. All right, let's get more news here. This is a post from Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, confirming a Todd Archer report on Cowboys wide receiver Jalen Cropper being released today. He will have to clear 24-hour waivers, but the team wants him back on the practice squad. This clears the way for either wide receiver Jonathan Mingo or cornerback Kalen Carson to be activated off IR this week. yeah, there was pretty much a guarantee that both those guys would be off their 21-day practice window after being on injured reserve. Jalen Cropper was activated and played, obviously, because of the injuries to Turpin and Lamb. Turpin and Lamb obviously were never put on injured reserve, so Cropper would have to be released and then put back on practice squad if you wanted to activate a Mingo or a Carson. Be interesting to see who they activate in this instance, right? Because remember, CeeDee Lamb and Turpin, one or the other or both return, you get 2 wide receivers and you release Cropper for the price of 1. So there's sort of a disconnect there. Do you activate Mingo or do you activate Carson with this open spot? Very interesting decision to make, because I think wide receiver is where it gets tricky for Dallas. And it really corner does too, because if you look at potential trade value, I don't know what the market is for Trayvon Diggs. I don't know what the market is for a guy like Jalen Tolbert. But if you look at this wide receiver group specifically, you look at Pickens, you look at Lamb, you look at Flanoy stepping up, like Turpin being the weapon X, you look at Mingo coming into the fold, right? There's only one football, right? And a guy like Tolbert, again, he's far from a star, but could you get someone that'd be willing to trade something for him? I wouldn't hate that, right? Because again, he's just not playing very much. I understand he's a key depth piece. I'm not saying the Cowboys will trade him. The price has to be right, of course, but it's an interesting decision to make. Corner also gets interesting. I'm not against trading Trayvon Diggs if someone is willing to absorb the contract and you get a favorable selection, right? I think Bland is playing fine. I think Stewart has been a good addition at nickel. We'll see what happens going forward. But I tell you what, if you like Shavon Revel, if you like guys like Kalen Carson, right, why not? And I'm not saying doing it right now, but if you look at what the trade deadline is November 4th, I'm recording this, it's the morning of 15th October, right? So you give it 2 or 3 weeks. If you like Kalen Carson, what he's doing, if Butler's coming back, if Revel's coming back, at a certain point, why not? Right? If someone's willing to give you something for him, something to keep in mind. I'm expecting the Cowboys to be sellers at the trade deadline. Honestly, not buyers. Not if the opportunity's there, jump on it. You look at teams like the Bengals, for example, could be an opportunity to make a big deal there. The Bengals could be in fire sale mode very quickly. They've got a game Thursday night against the Steelers. Bengals have lost 4 in a row. If they lose the 5th in a row against Pittsburgh, they're 2-5 with really not a whole lot of hope in front of them, right? At that point, without Joe Burrow coming back, they're, it's going to feel like the 2015 Cowboys in Cincinnati. Could they be selling off assets? Hendrickson, Logan Wilson, potentially. And if they're willing to do it at the right price, I could see the Cowboys being buyers, sort of a long-term approach to fix some positions. But I really think they're going to be sellers. And I really think it's going to happen at cornerback and wide receiver. This is definitely something to keep an eye on. Tolbert specifically, and really, to be totally honest, Trayvon Diggs. Because if Carson looks fine, if Revel's coming along, if Butler's coming along, and then you look at this cornerback room, and obviously you're big on Deron Bland, you just signed him. Reddy Stewart's done some good things. Kyrie Elam is not great, obviously. But listen, Trayvon Diggs has clearly not lived up to his contract. I think he's played better this season. I'm not saying he's a total disaster, but he's far from the elite guy we saw in 2021 and 2022. At a certain point, if someone's willing to take on his contract and give you a third or a fourth, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but I take it. All right, this next report is from the Cowboys Network X account. They posted owner Jerry Jones on defensive tackle Kenny Clark. He's played outstanding. Right now, we've gotten the money's worth to have Kenny Clark on this team. He's probably first or second on grading on our team on defense. Yeah, my perspective on Kenny Clark is that the first 3 games of the season, he was outstanding. He was playing at an elite level. He basically fixed defensive tackle overnight for Dallas. In the last 3 games, a little bit of a mixed bag. He's had his moments. He's had some plays in the pass rush game, but run defense has not been there at all for Clark. But I do think part of that is scheme and adjustment coming after those first 3 games. I think a lot of teams, what they've done to Dallas is because if you go back to 2024, for example, and really in 2023, teams would basically play a lot of just inside zone run concepts, blow Mozzie Smith and get up to these linebackers and pancake linebackers because they had safeties playing linebacker like Clark and Marquise Bell playing a lot of linebacker, and it just didn't work out. They just blown off the football. The Bills, 49ers, the Packers, and then a bunch of teams in 2024. And so what teams realized halfway through the season up to this point is that, listen, Kenny Clark, Oso Odigizua, they're actually good enough to stop zone schemes, right? You can't just run base stuff against Dallas. It used to be you could just line up and just run base concepts against this run defense, and like in 2023 and 2024, and just physically beat them. You're just physically better. Now teams have to scheme opportunities, scheme double teams, different run concepts. We saw it from the Carolina Panthers, right? It was a lot of schemed concepts that Dallas wasn't prepared for. And I think part of that was they generated angles on guys like Kenny Clark and Kenny Clark has kind of gotten blocked out a little bit. And same thing with Oso Digizua and really a lot of the defensive line. So I think, it's a learning experience, it's adapting experience as teams adjust to the fact that Dallas can, at least with Clark in the game, stop basic inside zone concepts, something they couldn't do in 2023 and 2024. So that's certainly an improvement. Now it becomes the counter to that. How does Clark and Oso Digizua and the interior of the defense respond to that? And I think it's going to be a challenge for them because Eberflus, if he wants to, again, play all these different zone coverages, like I mentioned in the beginning, and not be good at one particular concept, you really don't know what your run fits are going to be on a snap-to-snap basis, right? If you're the world's best cover two team, like, okay, you're going to be light in the box all the time. So it's a different run fit mentality. Or if you're going to play half cover two, half cover three, you're going to have a safety roll down into the box, right? Okay, different run fit mentality. If you never play man and you never blitz, okay, different run fit mentality. And it's one of those things where until Dallas figures out an identity defensively, a real legitimate one, I think they're going to have some issues. Obviously, the talent doesn't help. But I do think Jerry Jones coming out and publicly supporting Kenny Clark is a great decision from Jones, because here's the reason why. Even if Clark has, in my opinion, not played, again, first 3 games, great. Last 3 games, I think part of it was the scheme, but not so much. He is such a good leader. He's such a good culture guy. You want to put him up on a pedestal because his day in and day out work, his process, what he does in practice, the film room, all of those little things that really matter in terms of building a long-term culture and program, which has been the goal of Schottenheimer since he took over this team. Clark is the perfect example of that. So putting him up on a pedestal for all these young guys, the Ezra Rakus, the Leah Fowles, right, the Shamar Jameses, the Reddy Stewarts to see, right? You look at the Marshawn Nealons to see all these young guys, and even veterans that aren't playing great. When you look at, of course, the Dante Fowlers and the Sam Williams, you want them to look at, and really the offensive guys too, look at the Bookers, the BBs, the Guytons. You want them to look at a guy, the Jaden Blues, like Kenny Clark, and say that is the model to follow. And I think Jerry Jones elevating Kenny Clark is the right move. All right, let's get into this next report. This is courtesy of Todd Archer, beat reporter over at ESPN for Dallas. Does a lot of great work. Jerry Jones with optimism on CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Booker, and Kevontae Turpin this week. Without being doctor here and without the benefit of a week of practice, we are thumbs up on all. It's looking good, but that's just it. You got to have a week of practice. He said on 105.3 The Fan. Yeah, Turpin initially when the injury happened, I think everyone said 2-week injury, he'll be back against Washington, right? It may have been one of those things. There was some reporting that if it was like a playoff game, he could have, forced it and went against Carolina, and really prepared for it from that perspective. But, it's one of those things. They said, listen, it's really a 2-week. He'll be back just fine against Washington. So that's kind of in line there. Obviously the Cowboys did not put CeeDee Lamb or Tyler Booker on IR. So remember, they had 2 roster spots, which isn't a little thing, occupied by 2 guys who had no chance of playing really the past 3 weeks. And that does hurt the depth a little bit. They were able to overcome it in some ways and not in others, but the fact that they're close to returning is obviously a good sign. And look, to be totally honest, guys, if this team's going to be competitive, we know it's going to be on offense, right? The defensive talent isn't there. The scheme issues are obvious, right? And so it's one of those things, getting help back on offense, especially in the form of CeeDee Lamb, is really important, because one of the things I really want to focus on, with the exception of the Packers game, let's focus on just the Jets and the Panthers game, is that if you watch Dallas play those games on a snap-by-snap basis, they were not nearly as efficient as they've been in prior weeks without CeeDee Lamb, okay, and without Booker and all the other injuries they had up front on the offensive line, without Kevontae Turpin. They were a big play team, right? Flanoy had 2 big plays. Williams had that long run against the Jets. Pickens had that long touchdown, right? Perkins had a long catch and run. Big play team, right? A lot less methodical. Same thing against Carolina. A lot of their offense, big plays, right? The interception gave him a short field, led to a touchdown. Pickens had basically 3 big catches that set up 2 touchdowns and a field goal. So suddenly you look around and realize that's most of your offense when you're a big play offense. That's not sustainable. What they did the first 3-4 games of the season, or certainly the first 2 games of the season with Lamb into the fold before they fully integrated Pickens, was a very efficient, very methodical offense. They did that against the Packers, but eventually the injuries take their toll, and getting these guys back is so critical in terms of not needing to, the big plays, not needing to instead of being able to go 12, 13 play drives, instead of having to generate big plays to score, they don't have to do that as much. And I think that's going to be helpful. Obviously, getting CeeDee Lamb back and All-Pro would be huge. Turpin's a weapon X. Getting him back by himself is huge. And the rookie first-rounder, Booker, listen, TJ Bass has played admirably, but Booker is just sort of a physical mauler presence. He's a physical identity. There is a reason that since Again, since he got hurt after the Bears game, the Cowboys running game hasn't felt quite as physical. They've had their moments. Obviously, they were fine against the Packers and good against the Jets, but it wasn't quite the same mentality. Of course, there were other injuries involved as well, but I think getting Booker back into the fold, obviously Tyler Smith healthy again, I think getting this offensive line that really through the first few weeks of the season looked very physical and tough in some tough environments, and especially rookie, get these young guys back into the fold, that's all good news. And especially because on offense, they need all the help they can get because this defense, as we all know, is not very good. All right, let's get into this next report. This is courtesy of John Machota. A little bit of a lengthy one here, but I think it's important. Cowboys owner Jerry Jones continues to express that they're open for business to improve the roster. Jones on 105.3 The Fan said there's nothing untouchable when it comes to the picks they received in the Micah Parsons trade. So before I get into this, I got a question for you guys. I'm not too familiar with the dynamic here. Is 105.3 The Fan, obviously the local station, is that owned by Dallas? Is that a Cowboys-owned affiliate or something like that? Because they seem to get all these exclusives, and I kind of wonder why all the, Stephen Jones, Schottenheimer, Jerry Jones, they all have all these interviews and don't do a whole lot of one-on-ones with like ESPN or something like that. Is there some partnership there, some economic partnership? Because it seems like that seems to be the exclusive source of a lot of this stuff, and I really don't know why. I'm not from the area, so I can't tell you personally from my experience. So I want to ask you guys, I mean, what's special about 105.3 The Fan? Does Jerry Jones own it? Does he own the affiliate? He probably does. I would guess he does, or at least the Cowboys do. But I'm curious what the answer is there. Let me know if you guys know. But anyway, he says, there's nothing untouchable when it comes to the picks they received in the Micah Parsons trade. If we can improve our team and it makes sense for what we give up in the future, all of it's there. We have major resources that we wouldn't have had we not made that trade. I promise you, yours truly or anybody associated with the Cowboys has got our eyes really open to ways we can help this defense, and certainly don't want to preclude anything on offense either. There's nothing untouchable in our resources to help our team, and there's no way that I'm at a point right now to where I would not do something because of where we are into the season, 6 games. I would go as early as I would if we were talking 3 games back. So this is a great example of saying a lot but not saying anything, right? It's one of these things where Jerry Jones is really good at this. He talks for a long time about, gets an answer. Are you looking to make a trade? Are you looking to do X? Are you looking to do Y? And he'll talk for 2 minutes. And you'll be like, okay. And you'll leave the conversation. You'll leave you'll read the quote here and be like, wait, what's he saying? Right? He says they might do it, they might not. They're looking to do it. Offense, maybe. Defense, maybe. But we're not going to preclude anything either. It's just one of those things. It's the art of saying nothing while saying a lot. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys, with their multiple first-round picks in their cap space, are open for business. Now, my personal opinion is that they're going to be more sellers than buyers, right? And I'm not saying they will sell, but I think that's sort of their probably natural inclination. I think Trayvon Diggs, I think Jalen Tolbert are the 2 obvious guys to potentially trade. One name that someone floated around, and I disagree with this, but someone says it could be an interesting concept here, would be what would happen if, just in a really weird twist, if someone was willing to give up 2 first-round picks, it wouldn't happen for Pickens at this point. If CeeDee Lamb was healthy, would you trade Pickens and 2 first-round picks? I mean, it's more of a thought experiment. I don't think that would ever happen, and I don't think that's even close to happening, but it is an interesting thought. But I think it speaks largely to the point where the Cowboys actually have some wiggle room, some opportunities around the trade deadline, and really the roster in general for the first time in many years. I mean, you go back to even 2021, 2022. I mean, they were who they were, right? After 2021, they had to make some tough contract decisions, right? They said, we want to keep DeMarcus Lawrence, we want to keep Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, you're gone for salary cap purposes. At least that was the rationale, and I think it made economic sense at the time, especially though keeping Elliott and Gallup over Cooper, that clearly was the wrong move to make. And I honestly think that was a big reason why 2022 was a disappointment. That was a stacked team, but they just didn't have that number 2 outside Lamb. That's why also I think they're going to keep Pickens, and they're more than happy to pay him a lot of money to do so. But I do think it's interesting. The larger point here is that the Cowboys have more flexibility in front of them, and I think they're open to acquiring more of it. I think that's why trades involving maybe selling Diggs in a few weeks, maybe selling Tolbert in a few weeks, I think that's where the Cowboys likely go. That's my honest assessment, right? Trayvon Diggs was signed to his deal a long time ago. They can cut him in the offseason and open up a lot of cap space. Right now, if someone's willing to pick up Diggs for something, I think you make that consideration. I really do. If some team's willing to send you a 3rd rounder for Diggs and take on the contract, and you open up the cap space, and you like Revel and Butler's playing healthy and Carson's playing healthy, I mean, you got all these young corners on your roster. right? You've got guys like Revel and Butler and Carson, and of course, Deron Bland, he can hold on one side. Reddy Stewart's been admirable at the other nickel. He's not perfect, but as a young player, I think he's been capable, all things considered. If the opportunity's there, why not? Right? It's definitely something to keep in mind. I'm not blaming Trayvon Diggs for the defensive woes, but in terms of the value they've received ever since they extended him, a lot of it's injuries, and I get it, but it just hasn't been there. And now the question is with Dallas, do you have an opportunity to sell relatively high on Diggs, considering his value has dropped tremendously based on how much you're paying him? I think there's an argument to be said that that could be the case, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, let's get into this last report here, and just want to highlight this briefly. It just kind of came across my timeline. This was from the Barstool Sports account. They posted a blog. Things are going so great in Philadelphia that Zadarius Smith has decided to retire in the middle of the season out of nowhere. For those of you who aren't familiar with the story, Zadarius Smith, veteran defensive end, playing for the Eagles, he decides, I'm going to quit. I don't want to play anymore. I'm with the first place Philadelphia Eagles, defending Super Bowl champions, one of the best franchises in the NFL, and I'm just going to quit in the middle of the season. So it's an interesting decision for Zadarius Smith. It doesn't shine a great line on Philadelphia right now. Kind of a weird deal there with the Eagles, even though they're obviously still one of the better teams in football. But I do put this post out here just to put a little context. Whenever you feel just absolutely devastated and down the dumps, remember that there are other teams in the National Football League that are just going through it too. And that's the way it is in the NFL. And I know you don't care, you hate the Eagles, you're probably happy to see this, and I don't like the Eagles either. But the reality is sometimes we get so laser focused. And I noticed this because on my Cowboys Twitter account, it's obviously all just Cowboy stuff, and it's just a barrage of negativity nonstop. Like the entire feed, like bam, right in my face. Every single negative statistic, negative commentary you could possibly imagine. But if I go to my main flagship X account, which we do when we cover the rest of the National Football League, it's the same thing. It's all negativity, but it's every single other team too. So I just put this on there to put a little context. When you're like, gosh, it's the worst thing in the world being a Cowboys fan. Talk to a Bengals fan. They hate themselves. The Ravens fans, they hate themselves. The Browns, they hate themselves. Even the Steelers are like, here we go. We got a good record, but we're not even that good, right? You've got a lot of teams right now in the National Football League. The Rams are like, how do we have 2 losses? The 49ers are like, we're hurt again. The Dolphins are like, we suck. The Jets are like, we suck, right? The Bills are like, back-to-back losses. How good are we, right? You go across the entire National Football League, and everyone is pretty much miserable right now. It just seems to be the way it is in the NFL. So if you feel the barrage of negativity and feel like, gosh, being a Cowboys fan is the worst, understand that there are 31 other fan bases. They're feeling your exact same emotion right now. And I think that's just some important context. All right, let's get into the comments from yesterday. As we always like to on this channel, and as I always promise, we get started first with the member comments. And I appreciate our members, and if you want to support this channel, please become a member. It's a big help to us, allows us to keep doing this content and keep it rolling, and all the extra stuff we have planned going forward. We got some exciting stuff in the pipeline. Not going to spoil it yet, but I think a lot of you guys will enjoy it. But let's get into the comments here. This first one is from Plague Doctor. Posted, I've been critical of Flus for not adapting, but I'll never say he's a bad coach. His scheme is tried and true across the league and variants of it. Tampa 2, cover 3 multi-shell is a modern scheme and rather sound in its logic in a pass-heavy league when you have a strong 4-man front. Dallas is just not built like that. They had Micah, who is a one-man disruptor who was traded a week before the season, and 2 Pro Bowl man corners. That was their identity. Chaos and violence was what Quinn was built for, not for cohesion and read and react defense. On top of that, there was that metric where Dallas was the worst defense in the league without Micah that was being thrown around. I guess that metric was correct. Honestly, I just think they didn't expect this type of offensive production. They have a Super Bowl caliber offense, and now they're scrambling not squander that when Flus was probably expecting a bit of a rebuild. So I will push back on the Super Bowl caliber offense. It seems to be the theme going around a little bit. I think it's very, very good. But let's be totally honest here. What we've seen is a small sample size with this Cowboys offense. And while they do have a lot of talent, right, they do have a lot of flaws. Javonte Williams has been playing great, but, the backup running back has issues. The offensive line's beat up. It's a young offensive line, right? They got 1 rookie starter and 2 second-year guys. So, again, we're talking about a very young group. We got Pickens first year with the team. It's a first-year offense. They've been playing great. That's undeniable. And Prescott's been playing fantastic. And Schottenheimer and Adams have been playing really good. But everyone's saying, gosh, this offense is good enough to win a championship. Let's hold off on the reservation here when it comes to that, guys. I think there's a little bit more time needed. I think this is a really good offense, and they're playing well, and they put a lot of resources into the offense, first-round picks, trades, money, all those things. They hired an offensive coach, of course, but the reality is, I think they're very, very good, but to say they're a Super Bowl offense, I personally think a little bit of a stretch considering we've seen it for, 6 games, right? And again, they're playing good football, really good football, but let's, let's dial that back a little bit in terms of this team would be going to a Super Bowl if they were playing a little bit better defense. I think that's a little bit of wishful thinking. This is my personal opinion. You may feel differently. But you do bring up a great point about Eberflus and the fact that he's not a bad defensive coach, right? And I think that's important to understand. He was a bad head coach, obviously. The Bears actually fired him more for game management and for Caleb Williams' developmental purposes in the middle of the season last year. Obviously, losing wasn't helping the cause, but it wasn't really the defense that was the whole source of the problem. It was the Bears' offense with a total incompetence in the entire team, and they actually fired Eberflus and they promoted their offensive coordinator and said, okay, this will really help Caleb Williams, and the offense got worse. So I know a lot of people look at Eberflus in his time with Chicago and it wasn't great, but that wasn't all on him in terms of the other parts of the team, right? It was the defense was doing its part, the offense with Caleb Williams, he wasn't helping there, and he was bad in game management. Things like that happen, right? It's just the reality. I think he is a good defensive coach. But the question is, are you too stubborn? Are you too arrogant to understand what's in front of you? And I think it comes down to it's the right material. Is it the right teacher? Right, that's the key thing. And I think that's what the Cowboys have kind of commented on. You have Schottenheimer sitting in the meetings, right? Eberflus has the right approach, the right idea, the team defense, 100%. But do you really need to go whole hog into it? Do you need to go 91-9 zone versus man? And it's not like you're not the best cover 2 team. You're not the best cover 3 team. You're going back and forth in terms of what you like to do. And I understand you need to vary it and shift it up, but you're not becoming good enough at anything right now. And it goes back to the identity question. And the point about Micah Parsons, yeah, Eberflus probably built this with Micah Parsons in mind, saying, okay, great, we can play this coverages and Parsons will really help us out. That's 100% true. And he got dealt a bad hand, right? That's one thing we have to remember with Eberflus is he came into the season, listen, I've got an all-pro defender in Micah Parsons. He's the cog in the machine, and they traded him right before the season, right at the end of training camp. So it's not like he had time to go through training camp and figure out these guys. He's been trying to figure it out on the fly. And I think the pass rush issues I'm okay with. I really am. You talk about all the things, I get it, right? It was built for Micah Parsons. I think the biggest issue to me is a lack of confidence in the secondary and communication. And I think the fact that the run game scheme, the run defense scheme, because they aren't good enough or consistent enough in any particular type of coverage and just defense overall, that we're seeing some run game issues kind of oscillate back and forth too. It just feels like, again, it goes back to that commentary. What is this team going to be good at? Who are they supposed to be? And it seems like Eberflus just isn't communicating that effectively to the players. And it can be the right material, but if it's not the right teacher, there's going to be problems. All right, this next comment is from David Dobbins, 5887. If the schemes are solid, you want to win in the postseason, which those schemes are designed for, and the players can't perform or won't perform because they don't have confidence, then fire the players. Coddling players over scheme is why there's 35 years worth of dust on our latest trophy. Doing scheme over players is how New England has shiny ones. Jimmy Walsh, none of those guys dumped the team concept and schemes because of anyone's feelings, confidence, or abilities. Players are well-paid professionals. Do your damn jobs or be replaced. I'll take hungry street trash over lazy, unteachable, or just plain over-evaluated talent. Edit. For me, it's like this. At this particular time, I'm not nearly as interested on what a player thinks about the schemes that he hasn't executed, nor his confidence. No, I'm more interested in why he tackles like a player on a bad JUCO. The sad thing is that I can ask that of far too many players. It's an interesting point, and I get the concern there, and I understand that to a level. The reality is it's just not true in terms of recent NFL history. And in past NFL history, the Walsh scheme, the Landry, right, all of those guys, you have to remember that was before the era of free agency, right? It's a completely different mindset. You have total roster turnover so much every single season, right, with free agents, right? You just do. You have to play a lot of rookies and things like that. So it's a different environment. The Patriots, one of the reasons they were so good is because offensively and defensively, they were so adaptable. They changed who they were week to week, not just season to season, but literally game to game. That was a huge part of the Patriots dynasty under Bill Belichick. And I think that's an important thing to understand. They didn't just line up and say, we're going to be a cover 2 team this year or a man team this year, right? They'd have their tendencies, but they shifted them all of the time, especially in big moments, especially in the playoffs, right? They'd go from one defensive look to a completely new one, Sunday to Sunday.
And I think that's really important to understand. When you have this volatility of players and this change year in and year out, right? Even if you keep the big names, a lot of your depth guys, a lot of your backups, a lot of your edge guys are going to change. So it's just a different world in those older years. And I understand where you're coming from. And there's a lot of concerns with the talent and production on the field. That's undeniable. But I think it's just a different world. You can't just sit there and say, like, Bill Walsh and Landry, listen, we're going to just run our scheme and we're going to develop over 3 or 4 years and have the guys on the roster figure it out. The reality is so many of these guys are just going to change because it's modern NFL free agency. New guys added in, old guys leaving, right? It's just the way it works in the NFL. It's just a different mindset. And I think that's the challenge in front of Dallas right now. Defensively, we've seen offensively what they've done with an identity, with a mindset, with a focus. They'll have to tweak some things as talent comes in and talent leaves, right? Terrence Steele will probably get cut. Sanders won't be back with the injuries. We'll have to see what happens with Javonte Williams, right? There's going to be guys that are going to be not part of this offense in the long term that are right now on this team. Tolbert will probably be gone, right? There's Mingo may be gone at some point, right? So you look around this team and say, okay, on offense where they have an identity, but a lot of these pieces are going to be gone. And that's just, you're going to have to adjust to it, right? They're going to have to adjust some of their schemes, but the high level identity, versatile running attack, motion shifts, marrying the pass and run game, that's there for Dallas. That's going to stay there. The question defensively is, what is the identity? Who are you? Right? There are some teams, Wink Martindale, former defensive coordinator in the NFL now with the Michigan Wolverines, he was a blitz guy. Cover zero blitz, I don't care. Putting my corners in terrible situations. This is who we're going to be. Right? Greg Williams, same way. Right? Jim Johnson, late Jim Johnson, Philadelphia Eagles, same way. Right? There are some coaches that are, listen, we're a 2-deep team. We play a lot of cover 2, a lot of 2-man. That's just how we want to play. We're not going to play that all the time, of course, but that's just the kind of mindset we want to have, right? There are some teams that are 3-4, right? We're going to, the Pittsburgh Steelers are like this. We're going to have 3 huge guys in the middle of defense, and we're just going to, have 4 linebackers, and we're going to stop the run and do a lot of exotic blitzes and slants out of a 3-4. The Falcons right now, defensively, their mentality is we're going to throw a lot of funky stuff at you with a lot of great athletes that we have in our front 7 and just see if we can generate negative plays, right? Every team generally has an identity on offense and defense. The problem with the Cowboys is, what is it? You can be bad. Wink Martindale's been I'll give you an example. Rob Ryan had an identity when he was the defensive coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys, a lot of blitzing, and it was bad, right? You can have an identity and have it not work out, but the problem with Dallas right now is what are they trying to be good at, right? What are they working towards, right? They're at point A. Obviously, if they improve, where are they going to get to point B? What is the direction? What is the heading? And that is the biggest concern with Eberflus right now, right? I think his overall thought process is very good, but without a clear direction and paths to achieve the goal and what improvement looks like, what is going on? And listen, maybe it'll click. Maybe they'll figure it out, right? I kind of doubt it, to be totally honest, right? And I am concerned about you have guys losing confidence just because then you're not getting better. Then you're not improving. You're not figuring out who can play and who can't. That is my biggest concern. All right, this next comment is from the BizCore 9315. He posted, Panthers knew how to attack this defense. They play the exact same defense, and if we were healthy offensively, we'd score 40, which means our defense is doomed. Matt Eberflus must go. This defensive scheme is soft. His 3 points is good. Let's catch you on soft coverage mentality is weak. If we had Dan Quinn's system, we'd be okay. A few comments like this, but I want to remind everyone, what it was like with Dan Quinn, right? Oh boy, there were some fun games. You blow out some teams, right? You'd have great moments, and then you play a good team and get humiliated. Right, because Dan Quinn is one of those interesting coaches, and he's a very good coach, phenomenal coach, one of the best in football. Worked with Seattle, Atlanta, Dallas, and now with Washington, doing great things. He's maybe the best turnaround artist defensively, great culture guy, right? Absolutely outstanding. The problem is in big moments, his defense always fails. So let me ask you this. Would you be okay with Dan Quinn on this defense and this offense does enough and they get to 9-10 wins, they sneak into the playoffs as a wild card, and they lose 48-10, 48-32, like we saw? Right? Would that make you happy? I mean, it's a serious question. If it does, great. But listen, that's the reality right now. We know that's what would happen because we've seen that happen, not just with Dallas, but with other teams. The Washington Commanders gave up 55 points to Philly last year in the postseason. 55 points. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. If you look at over the last 4 games that Dan Quinn has coached defensively in terms of points surrendered, it's about 40 a game in the playoffs. 40. Right, he was the guy that gave it the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history, right, when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm not saying he's a bad defensive coach. He's one of the best. But we've seen the Dan Quinn story before. Maybe he'll change it in Washington. But it's one of those people that say, we missed the Dan Quinn days. Really? I don't. I really don't. Because, yeah, it was great to beat bad teams and look good doing it. It was awesome. Only then humiliated by good teams all the time, it got tiring, right? And it's just the fact. Change needed to be made. And Dan Quinn, he's not the solution. Dan Quinn's style isn't the solution either. And I think that's important to understand. You can sit there and say, I don't like what Eberflus is doing, which is fair and probably true, but you can't just at the same time say Dan Quinn was the answer and is the answer, that kind of style. That's not true either, because we've seen that movie before, guys, and it doesn't end well. All right, these next comment here is from Jason Compton, 1625. I don't understand the condemnation of Eberflus. He hasn't lost his ability to coach. He had all offseason to play with Parsons and a week prior to trade him. Next fans have wanted 2 new safeties. It was clear the Cowboys weren't a playoff team, and now everyone is up in arms over poor performances. Yeah, I am kind of confused by the expectations game here. So let me pose this thought experiment. I was thinking about this yesterday, right? If I told you going into week 1, the Cowboys traded Micah Parsons, right? Knowing the Cowboys coming into the season, they traded Micah Parsons. I'm like, okay, they are also going to have the vast majority of their snaps through 6 games. CeeDee Lamb's going to be out through injury. Okay? The overwhelming majority of snaps, Cooper Beebe is going to be out. Your rookie, Tyler Booker, he's going to miss multiple games. Tyler Smith's going to miss a game. Guyton's going to miss a game. You're going to have 5 different starting offensive line combination in 6 games, right? You're going to have your second running back, Sanders. He's going to be out for the season, right? He's going to miss time. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. You're going to have 1 linebacker miss time and Sanborn. You're going to have 1 defensive end, Nealon, miss time. You're going to have 1 of your corners, Deron Bland, miss multiple games. You're going to have 1 of your safeties miss multiple games, right? And I throw all this at you and say, okay, how do you expect the Cowboys to do the first 6 games of the season? In the absolute best case scenario, I was thinking about this, would be 3-3, and you could see a path to 1-5 and 0-6 with those injuries, right? Going into the season, trading Parsons, right? All of those injuries on offense, right? Even some injuries on defense. They've been a little healthier on defense, but again, one of their best players, Bland, has missed time. Starting safeties missed time. Starting linebackers missed time. A defensive end has missed time. Overshown is still out, right? They've been far from healthy on the defensive side of the football. Perrion Winfrey, he's obviously been out. Kalen Carson coming back to the fold. A lot of depth guys have been hurt, right? So they've been far from healthy on defense. And they've been devastated with injuries on offense. If you would tell me what your record was with the expectations, I mean, people 3-3 best case scenario, a real path to 1-5 or 0-6 with those injuries, right? The Cowboys have been hit with the injury bug as bad as any team in football, except for maybe the 49ers, because their quarterback the 49ers have been devastated, but when you factor in the quarterback injury, it just pushes them over the top, right? The Cowboys have been just decimated, and they found a way to survive because of Prescott and Schottenheimer and Adams, right? And because of that, we have these expectations. But the reality is this was never a championship team going into the season. It wasn't even remotely close, guys. Was not even. They told you they weren't a championship team when they traded Micah Parsons. So this weird expectations of, listen, they're playing poorly. It's like, what did you expect? Now, to be fair, my goal with Eberflus, and I said this before the season, was baseline competency defensively, right? It's not going to be good. It's going to be below average, but can you be competent? Can you line up and play? Listen, they're not a good defense, but there's some level of competency there. And that is the problem, that with the coverage bust, that there's been a lot of issues with baseline competency, and now the running game collapse against Carolina. Now there's some issues there as well. So that's my biggest concern. That's why I think I have some issues with Eberflus right now, is because the coaching has to elevate the talent. Listen, this is a bottom 5 talent defense, but it should not be, if with good coaching, it shouldn't be, a 28th ranked defense, a 26th ranked defense, not 31st or 32nd, depending on your metric. That to me is my biggest issue with Eberflus. But I do agree with people saying like, oh my goodness, what is wrong with this team? Guys, they told you before the season they were not going to be a Super Bowl contender. No one who trades an all-pro player before the season does it because they think they're a championship contender. No one has ever done that. The Cowboys knew they weren't a championship contender. Schottenheimer's not a coach you hire if you think you're a championship contender, right? You hire a Pete Carroll, right? A veteran guy, an older coach that's won a championship, right? You hire a Mike McCarthy if you think you're a championship contender, for example. And the Cowboys made a clear decision. They wanted to rebuild the entire program, and that's what they're doing. Crimson, I like the way you kind of stylized it there. Crimson7 says, I love your insight and explanations. Dude, seriously, thank you for the daily videos. Thank you for commenting. I really appreciate it. Comments mean a lot to me, guys. Also on the potential Diggs trade, what do you think we could get out of him at this point? Anywhere between a 3rd and a 6th. It depends on the team and the desperation. I think you get what you can later, not now, right? You want to make sure Carson can play. You want to see how Rebel's coming along. You want to see how Butler's coming along, right? You don't want to trade Diggs right now. You want to, give it a few weeks, see if an injury pops up somewhere else with a different team. But there's a lot of teams that are beat up that think they can, they need some veteran help to survive. I think by, first week of November, if Overshone is playing and back, if Revel's back, if all these guys are back, you're like, all right, we like our depth. We want to see some young guys playing corner. Now's the time to sell Diggs. I think 3rd and a 6 makes sense. Just get something in return, I think, is better because in all likelihood, there's a 90% chance they're going to cut him in the offseason for salary cap relief, and especially considering his performance isn't even remotely close to how much he's being paid. Jesse Brown, 75.99 comments, we need a lot of help beyond the scheme on defense. My linebackers don't seem to know how to gap fill. My safeties have always been horrible in coverage. The DBs are at 70% health-wise and don't do zone very well. And we still need D-line help. Anyone who thought the Cowboys would be better than 8-9 this year don't really know much. New coaching staff and all of these things take a couple years, my friends. Yeah, great point, right? I said before the season, I said if everything went right for Dallas, this was before the Parsons trade, they were a 10-win team. If everything went wrong, they were a 7-win team. My prediction was about 8-9, right? And they traded Parsons, and they've had a lot of injuries and the defensive woes. So, to be totally honest, like almost everything that could go wrong has gone wrong for Dallas. So that's an important consideration. And listen, anyone who thought they were a championship team, they just weren't watching. They just weren't paying attention. All right, this next comment is from Tone Cyphers, 9239. Shoddy was signaling extreme displeasure in the communication from Flus to the field and then to the rest of the defense. He was expressing serious frustration with having to waste timeouts because the defense was confused and not lined up. Between the lines, it's the DC's fault for choosing a player with horrible communication skills, low IQ, and subpar leadership skills to communicate the calls. It's like parents going on a date and trusting the immature, lazy, unruly kid to take care of the house when they're gone. Then they come back home shocked that the kitchen was on fire, the dog escaped and is running around the neighborhood, and one of the other kids has a broken arms. That's what Shoddy is seeing from Flus. Poor awareness and lacking judgment, which plagued him at Chicago. Chicago is already playing better football with a better coach. This is a really great point because, again, it goes back to the right material and the wrong teacher. And it also goes back to who are you appointing to lead and how are you going to execute your message. And I think that's why you got a lot of frustration with Schottenheimer and a lot of frustration with guys like Trayvon Diggs. Because right now they've basically appointed Kenneth Murray as one of the leaders, and he's just awful. And I don't mean that to be negative. He's just played poorly. He's had communication breakdowns. He looks lost at times. It's one of those things when Sanborn comes back, and I don't know what his availability is for this week in terms of concussions. It's hard to figure out. I would assume he's probably, considering if it's like Guyton, where Guyton missed one game, Sanborn is probably back into the fold. I tell you what, I just hate seeing Murray with the way he's playing on the field. And I think that's part of it. And I think that's part of the problem because Shoddy is very big on, having the right, meritocracy, getting the right guys on the field that earn it, things like that. And Murray is not earning it. Now, I get it. The injuries to Sanborn, it's a brand new linebacking core, a lot of young players. But I'd rather throw out young players that are at least flying around and at least trying to play than having a guy like Murray who looks lost. And I think that's part of the problem with Eberflus is that his lieutenants, the guys he's putting his on-the-field leaders, Murray and to a lesser extent Sanborn, are playing so poorly that it reflects very poorly on Flus, and the communication issues that are coming from Flus to the field are creating issues. And I guarantee you that's what Shoddy's frustrations are with. I think you hit the nail right on the head here. It's one thing if they were, hustling to the football, lined up correctly all the time, and they were just getting beat. Right? It happens. Even running Flus is super heavy zone scheme. Hey man, just getting beat. Quarterbacks making great throws, but they're having communications breakdowns. They're not in the right gaps, right? They've got linebackers that are supposed to be the smart green dot guys all over the place looking lost. It looks like a real big issue. And one of the things with the Eberflus hire that was supposed to happen was that from a coaching perspective, because he's a linebackers guy, he was supposed to get better play at least out of the linebackers than the talent on the field, and that hasn't happened. It's been the opposite. I think all those things really point to Shoddy's frustration and why he's taking a more active approach, and why I mentioned yesterday he's already setting the conditions to potentially move on from Eberflus if things don't change. Jeff Bateman, 2339, commented, your videos are ridiculously long. I've never been able to pay attention for more than 5 minutes. Next, in all caps. And then my favorite comment of the year, DJ the Kid 1 responded, way to say you're not that smart. Thank you, DJ the Kid 1. That made my day. That was hilarious. That made me laugh. I'm not trying to pick on Jeff here, right? Jeff Bateman, obviously my videos, if you're happy to not like them and not watch them, by all means. I think it's kind of funny, though, the response there. Way to say you're not that smart. Pretty funny response. That made my day. DJ the Kid. Hope to see you comment more in the future. But all right, so listen, to kind of circle back here, it's clear the Cowboys really like some players on this team and this defense. Ezra Rocker at the top of the list, right? Listen, he's the future of this defense, undeniably so. He's the next DeMarcus Lawrence. They basically let Lawrence walk and drafted the next one in the second round, who was a second round pick in his own right. So it seems like the Cowboys have done a good job there. There's talent issues for sure. The Flus issues are very obvious in terms of not necessarily the scheme and the concept, although I think the lack of a clear direction. Again, be a cover 2 team, be a cover 3 team, or be a zone blitz team, or be some kind of team that you can, this is who we are, this is who we're going to be. And maybe they're working on it behind the scenes, right? Maybe it's just hard for us to see. I'll throw that caveat out there. But from the product on the field, we're not seeing what this defense is trying to become. Not even remotely close. It just seems like, hey, here's what we're playing, and we're playing it poorly, and there's no sign of getting it any better. And I think that is a big concern. Obviously, the communication issues and the personnel issues are still there. And look, we'll have to see what the Cowboys try and do to improve. Obviously, got a week of practice. Schottenheimer has talked about some things down the pipeline, which we'll talk in the coming days as the Cowboys try and just figure out a way to get some improvement on defense, getting guys healthy on offense, and playing good offensive football. A lot of things to talk about as always, and we'll get to it tomorrow. But until then, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.